Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to what is a glorious Carrow Road in the sunshine. We started in August with lovely weather ahead of that game against Liverpool, and we've got it again for the final game today against Spurs. So it's going to be an interesting one for various reasons and various strands, even though Norwich City specifically have very little to play for beyond, obviously, the big battle for 19th, which everyone is talking about as the Premier League final day kicks off at 4 p.m. We should have the team news any moment now. It is going to be interesting to see who that contains and what it looks like. Probably not expecting Billy Gilmore to be involved. Obviously, ruled out of injury. There's obviously a conversation to be had around Ben Gibson, who was a doubt as well. And I think we're going to get the answers here. We do. So Norwich have, and very interestingly straight away, Tim Krul in goal, Max Aarons, Grant Hanley, Sam Byram and Dimitris Giannoulis as a back four, Sorensen and Norman the midfield two, with Dowell and Rashica on the flanks, Elise Malou behind Timu Pukki, the subs bench, Gunn, Zimmerman, Tomkinson, Rupp, Gibbs, Springett, Schollis, Rowe and Puaheta. So that's no Gibson, no Gilmore, perhaps as we were expecting, Pad. But I mean, immediately, Tim Krul, I know what the conversation will be immediately as we go into him. Angus Gunn has obviously got got ahead of him in the last few games, done quite well by all accounts, and suddenly finds himself out of the team on the final day. There will be some people looking at that and maybe drawing conclusions as to what Tim Krul's future looks like.
And probably rightly so, Connor. Yeah, I think there's been a little bit under the surface about could he be maybe looking to move on. There was a line, I think we had it after Brighton, where he was talking kind of in the context of wanting to be part of Holland's World Cup squad back end of this year, and whether that would be impacted negatively for Louis van Gaal if he was back in the Championship. I think the club at that point were quite keen to maybe downplay that, and it was more just an honest admission rather than signalling that the end was near. But, you know, I think that's pretty significant today, if I'm honest, in terms of where Tim Krul is at the start of next season, because Angus has done nothing that would merit him dropping out. So there will be a few players playing their last games in Norwich shirts today, and the full picture will only come clear after today and moving into next week. And Stuart Webber sitting down with some media, maybe not us, but with some media. So I think you can, without wanting to definitively say anything, because we don't know definitively, but that to me smacks of a chance for Tim Krul to, rightly, given his service, say a farewell to Norwich. We'll obviously put it to Dean Smith after the game. I'd imagine Dean Smith will probably dead bat it ahead of any official announcements, but just on the very basis of what has Angus Gunn done wrong in the last 2 or 3 games, the fact that he went into the team and Tim Krul came out was a reflection of Tim Krul's form not being where it needed to be. The Newcastle game obviously springs to mind, 1 or 2 others as well. And now he's back today, when in the interim, Angus, certainly at Leicester, you couldn't fault him at that game. And Wolves, he made a brilliant save and they got a point. So there's not been too many of them recently. So I think we can take it as read. It is hashtag farewell, Tim.
Yes, absolutely. Although, you know, if we're going to... difficult to flip it onto a positive at the moment on anything, but he did have a very good game for Newcastle against Spurs at the old White Hart Lane. I remember struggling to think of what year it would have been. Maybe around 2013-14. I think it's still the record for the most amount of saves a goalkeeper has made in a Premier League game. So maybe that's an omen ahead of today. And while we're talking about Tottenham, I'll bring you their team. They've got Lloris in goal, Emerson Royale, Sanchez, Dyer, Davis and Sessegnon, their back 5, Bentancur and Højbjerg, the midfield 2, with Kulusevski, Son and that man Harry Kane up front. I mean, it's a pretty mouth-watering perspective, that front three, from their point of view. Obviously, maybe slightly less inviting from a Norwich point of view. Their subs bench: Galini, Roden, White, Winks, Craig, Devine, Lucas Moura, Stephen Bergvine and Dane Scarlett. It's a move away from the back 3 pad that worked so well for Norwich City at Wolves last weekend. Are you a little bit surprised at that, given what we saw, which was a little bit of structure? It was Norwich City playing to a game plan and completing that, but also the fact that Tottenham play a 3 at the back as well, or is that just reflective maybe of the lack of centre-back options that Dean Smith has available to him at this moment in time?
Well, you say that, Connor, but I'm looking at that bench and both Zimbo makes it and Gibson doesn't make it. So, and Zimbo, you know, I can't think of the game now that he came in recently, but he was clearly off the pace, not having had a huge amount of Premier League exposure this season. So whether it does boil down to, well, Could you go with Zimmerman again in a 3? Dean Smith maybe erring on the side of you probably couldn't. But it is a surprising sense of not only Wolves last week, but go back to that December game, which Norwich lost 3-0 at the London Stadium, but in a 3, Omabama Daly was in the 3 that day. There was a fair degree of control and composure. Individual errors again, sadly, came to bite them a little bit too hard that day. But in terms of the structure, I felt they were quite competitive. And and Dean Smith himself gave the sense on Friday he was still toying with that. At that stage, when he spoke to us Friday morning, they wasn't sure on Gibson. But clearly he's not been able to make it with that back issue that he picked up towards the end of the Wolves game. So probably comes down to personnel more than anything else, but it is a surprise, and I don't think it improves Norwich's chances, frankly, for me, because as you touched on earlier with the Tottenham team news, they will commit men forward at every opportunity, and just have that as it was against Wolves, as Dean Smith painted it. He wanted an extra body and to go with a 5 because he felt they'd been far too easy to cut open. Well, 1 week on, having that produced a positive result, the first in 6. You're back to a 4, so it doesn't really chime with kind of the direction of travel, and it can only really, looking at it, be down to, my eyes drawn to young John Tompkinson on the bench as well, but I don't think you necessarily start him today. It just wants to have a look at from the bench, maybe get on in the second half. Another development lad getting a few Premier League minutes, but yeah, you have to assume that he's gone back to the 4 mainly down to personnel / lack of.
Yeah, and Zimmerman hasn't played much football at all this season as a whole, let alone recently. And as you said, I think it was Chelsea, wasn't it, where he came in and looked a little bit off the pace in a back 3 as well. So maybe that was in Dean Smith's thinking. Jacob Sorensen as well, another interesting one. I mean, there's been kind of clamours for him to start for certainly a significant portion of the second half of the season. I felt he came on last weekend against Wolves and did a pretty good job. But is there an element of surprise that we're not seeing Lucas Rupp from the start, given obviously the news that was announced on Friday that whatever happens today, this will be his last outing at Carrow Road, if of course he gets onto the pitch, on the bench today?
Yeah, maybe. And of course he went with Rupp in 1 or 2 of the recent games, didn't he? So again, it smacks of a head coach maybe wanting to have a look at an option who he knows is in the building for next season. Now Rupp is exiting that building very shortly in an area of the squad where they don't have too many options, and you'll feel they'll need to address that. Although there are some, highly rated 23s options, but for where Norwich need to be next season, I think they're going to have to go into the market, and if they do, maybe a Jakob Sorensen performing today in this sort of company just gives Dean Smith some extra food for thought, really. You didn't really sense he took his chance the last time he had a start recently. And he probably needs to show something today for Dean Smith to think, yeah, I can rely on him as an actual frontline option rather than a valuable member of the squad. So, he'll be desperate to put a marker down, I'm sure. And talking to players playing for Norwich for the last time, of course, alongside him, Matthias Norman. And we could dedicate a whole podcast to that man and his sadly frustrating injury hit Norwich spell, because there was a player there, no doubt about it, but just hasn't happened. So, yeah, safe to say he's appearing for the last time in Norwich yellow as well today.
My head immediately went to tattoos there when you said a whole podcast on Matthias Norman, but yeah, you're probably right. A podcast on his Norwich City career would be far more interesting, I think. It's going to be a tough afternoon, I think, for Norwich City. Tottenham, of course, still have something to play for. They need to avoid defeat here today at Carrow Road in order to get that final Champions League qualification place, that 4th place finish that gets spoken about so much. Thank you very much. Arsenal, of course, the other team who are going for that. So there's an added edge from that perspective for them as well. What needs to be seen from a Norwich City perspective today? Because I think there's a lot of people who are feeling relatively fed up with this season. Of course, it does finish today, and that is probably comes with a little bit of relief for us all, to be honest, who've had to follow Norwich City throughout the entirety of what's been a really disappointing, miserable campaign. How important is it that there's a performance today to send these fans off into the summer with a little bit of optimism, or if not as a collective, certainly a few individuals that maybe stick their head above the parapet and give us reasons for optimism ahead of a championship season as it will be next year?
Well, if you're a glass half full person, you'd want both. You would want, irrespective of the result, because I think it'll be beyond them today, given they're playing a team who couldn't be any more motivated to get a result under a head coach who would demand nothing less. So I think the result will be beyond them today, if I'm honest. But you do want collectively and individually something to show these fans who are here today, the green and yellow persuasion at least, that there is a little bit of optimism. And Dean Smith actually framed it in those terms after the Wolves game. He talked about maybe feeling that result of performance was something, scant though it was, for those away supporters who've trekked the length and breadth. And of course, they went over and very pointedly acknowledged those away fans, Smith and his players, after the Wolves game. They'd love to be able to do something on their lap of appreciation today that shows that, yes, we know it's been nowhere near good enough. We know the reasons for that. But hopefully you've seen something again today on the following on from Wolves to suggest that, there is a grain or two of optimism. But I don't think that necessarily is going to maybe placate a few. Clearly there's a lot of Norwich fans are very frustrated now and fed up, and they'll need to see more than something on this pitch today to convince them that they're going to be able to be competing at the right end of the Championship. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. If we go home today and Tottenham maybe have won the game, and Norwich haven't really put any more points on the board and finished 20th and haven't got the financial uplift from overhauling Watford in terms of merit money, but you've seen something from a player who you feel could be part of it next season, then, at least it shows that, it's maybe not as bleak as some fans probably feel it is at the minute. But my overriding feeling today is let's just get this game done, out of the way, and then ride off into the sunset and forget almost about this season, as difficult as that will be. But I guess because it's a very, very short turnaround, relatively, probably less than 3 or 4 weeks, and they're back at Colney again for their testing and building into the new season. There won't be too many weeks we'll have to dwell on it. But today does feel like, just put a full stop on it, close the door, and don't look back in anger.
Absolutely. That seems like a pertinent point to leave it. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for watching these all season. I think we've done one of these for every single game, which is pretty good going. Of course, we'll be back in the new season with these as well, hopefully on a more optimistic fronts, of course, for the pre-season friendlies as well. There's a lovely shot of Carrow Road to leave you with. The sun has kind of gone behind the cloud for the minute, but when I arrived here, it was looking absolutely resplendent. Pink and Plus app, the place to go. I'm on the live blog this afternoon for all updates, and of course you can come and join the discussion or keep me a little bit of company if that works for you as well. And then we've got a live event this Tuesday with Chris Sutton. So if you're yet to get your tickets for that, details on the app or on the main site as to how you can come along for free. Epic Studios, 7 o'clock. It'd be good to see as many of you there as physically possible. But I think that's it from us for these. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.